one that's even closer to my heart because it's one of these crazy ideas that I had. They seem to lose sensitivity during aging, and that then leads to it actually doesn't work that way. It works better if you have a complete mismatch. Completely unexpected finding. No one believed that that would be the case, but that was my original idea, and I had this idea about 10 years ago. So those are two things that keep me excited to be a researcher. This is fundamentally a flaw in the system, that we don't reward people that are doing something completely new unless someone how big is doing it. It's much the same with the Nobel Prize last year when...
Hello, Bob. Thank you so much for coming back to Chung Institute's podcast.
My pleasure to be here again.
Bob, it has been a real pleasure to stalk you, watch you on LinkedIn and all the work that you're doing also in Sweden, the university there, and your research. And last time I know we had a really insightful conversation for current researchers and also about neurodegenerative disorders. And this conversation will be for upcoming researchers. And I'm curious, first of all, if there are any updates at all from the work you've been doing from last year to now.
Yeah, we just actually published a couple of really, really nice papers, which have seen the end of lots of years of work, actually. We spent almost 1.5 years in revision. A lovely story which has come out in Nature Neuroscience, which shows a very interesting finding that in the dorsal horn of the CNS, which is sort of the top part, then there's a particular area that seems to be very, very prone to damage during normal aging. And we identified a molecule, our favorite molecule, TGF-beta, as being extremely important there. That it seems that the microglia, the cells that we studied, they seem to lose sensitivity to this molecule during aging, and that then leads to a damage of the myelin, so that the nerves become damaged there. So that was a really cool, interesting finding, and then we characterized the molecular pathways. And then the other story which came out in the Journal of Inflammation just recently is actually one that's even closer to my heart, because it's one of these crazy ideas that I had, which I was trying to convince people to do for ages in the lab, and no one wanted to. And in the end, a lovely Spanish postdoc that I had, Irene, decided to take it on. And the idea was to do a transplantation of microglia into a brain. So we deplete microglia and then we fill up with new microglia in order to try and, the idea is that you use this as a therapy to change bad microglia into good microglia. But the cool thing we wanted to test was, does it really matter if the microglia we put in are from the same mouse, or can they be from a different mouse, so that it's not the same major histocompatibility? And it turns out that if you actually use, so this is like for donor transplantation, you want to have the best match as possible in order to not get rejection. But we showed that it actually doesn't work that way. It works better if you have a complete mismatch. And then we got a much better transplantation of the cells, which was completely unexpected finding. And no one believed that that would be the case, but that was my original idea, and I had this idea about 10 years ago. So to finally see it work has been really, really cool. So those are two things that keep me excited to be a researcher.
That's amazing. And are you going to do that with a human?
I mean, that would be the idea. It's a novel principle. One of the settings would be, for example, in treating patients with ALS. We know that then because of genetic irregularities, then all the myeloid cells in their body are not so good. So you can't use their own cells from the blood to do this, but you could then be able to use universal donors. And now we should work out in a human setting what would be the best mismatch. A bit more difficult experiment to do, but we can start to look at the cells from different types of donors and try and see if they have the properties that we see in the mouse cells, to try and work that out. But I think that would be a nice thing to think about in the future.
Oh, that makes me so excited, because I feel like then there can be transformation that's not technology based, but actually living human based.
Yes, I mean, we do lots of technology things as well. So but no, I think it's quite nice when you can come down to the cellular biology, and that's really, it's really sort of tweaking the immune system. If you have an immune system that's behaving badly, you just want to re-educate it. So it's a bit more subtle, and coming in, some of these therapeutic tools are quite blunt. They're like hard hammers. So I like this idea of just resetting things. But
Is this why you recently said something about we should all believe in our craziest ideas, wildest ideas? Can you say more?
yeah, throughout my career, when I like to think that I'm a creative person. I have I like to do multidisciplinary research where I'm taking things. I have a history of all sorts of different things. I think we talked about it last time. I've been a parasitologist, autoimmunity, cell biology, cancer, and now I'm doing neurodegenerative diseases. And it's a bit like, if you ask an academic what a perfect CV would look like with a publications list, it would be very, very, you do one thing and you just do it better and better during the time. I mix and match, and people can't look at my publication list and they can't work out what type of scientist I am. And I like that because I can take things I learned from one field and then try and see, well, what happens if I apply it there? But that's not really the way the grant bodies like things. So when I'm applying for money, people often think, well, what's this? I never heard of this before. I've done it several times. Even when I was younger, it was even worse because I didn't have any ponders then as a researcher, just like as a young postdoc and not known. So I came up with ideas of looking at Siglecs, which are carbohydrate receptors on myeloid cells, which are really, really interesting, and they were completely novel at the time. But no one, when I sent that in to the Swedish Medical Research Council, no one knew what a Siglec was, so they had no idea what I was talking about. And I think this is fundamentally a flaw in the system, that we don't reward people that are doing something completely new. Unless someone how big is doing it. It's much the same. The Nobel Prize last year went to regulatory T cells. And these cells were cells that were worked on under a different name, suppressor T cells, for many years during the 80s, 1980s. But the researchers that were trying to prove that these cells existed were not really convinced. No one was convinced about them, and they basically all disappeared. And then a few years later, they were reinvented as a regulatory T cell, and because there was a big researcher involved, and suddenly this was accepted. And all these people that had done the groundwork didn't get too much recognition for it, but I think in essence they were the same cells. So the academic world is very conservative when it comes to new things, new thinking. There are some fundings made available for innovation, but the concept of innovation, the interpretation of what innovation means varies from person to person. So sometimes it's not very innovative. But I like this idea of research should be going. It's like being a pioneer in the 1800s, going out west, in the US, and prospecting and finding new areas and being the first person to be there. That's the cool thing with science. And many of the Nobel Prizes are rewarded for these type of seminal discoveries, which at the time people didn't really understand, but it's only then 20 or 30 years later when you see how the knowledge has been implemented that you say this was a seminal finding. But there is this statistic that I think it's like 70% of the Nobel Prize winners were never actually funded for doing the research that led to their big discovery. And that says something about the system. So I think that it's nice to be a little bit, I mean, it's good to do solid research as well. And of course, if you base things on firm foundation, and the chances, there's less risk that it won't work, which I guess is what the funders want to do. They want to have the best result for their money. But I think we need to have a little bit of room for this, like just do a crazy idea.
So how did you get out of this box, though, Bob? I mean, for real.
I mean, it's a privilege when in a situation where you have enough research funding to be able to do what you want to do. And I have a private donator now, which gives me absolutely free hands to do what I want to do, because there's no one deciding what I do with that money. So that's and obviously I couldn't do that when 25 years ago, but I can do it now. So I think that's part of it. But more than that, I think it's like you need to believe in your thoughts, and if no one else believes you, then fine. I was at a conference and trying to convince people that you could use live parasite infections to cure autoimmunity, and people were just saying, "You what? You're going to infect people with parasites, and you could get rid of them with drugs afterwards." But the biological effect would be that retrain the immune system, and it would have a good effect. It worked really well in experimental models. And they were just coming and saying, "You're completely crazy. You can't think of doing this." And then someone's actually managed to do that. And that's become a standard therapy for inflammatory bowel disease. So, crazy is not so crazy. And it really, one shouldn't use the word crazy, because that invokes a sort of a state of mind which is uncontrollable. Having a off the wall or off the beaten track or off the mainstream ideas as a scientist is not crazy. It's just showing that you can be innovative in your thinking. I think we should reward that a little bit more.
Yeah, especially nowadays. I don't know about Sweden, but I noticed here in the United States, it's no longer about let's have a new idea. It's about I have a thought and I'm going to prove my thought until until the end, and then someone is going to disprove it a week later.
Sometimes, or sometimes they support it as well. But I think at the moment we're still stuck in this technological revolution. The techniques, the omics revolution has been incredible, but it's just methods. There's no thought there. It's like if I smash up these cells and I take single cell RNA or nuclear RNA now, it's always getting more intricate in the levels, then I'm going to find something. But where's the hypothesis?
Yeah.
The hypothesis, I guess, is if I smash up the tissue and use these techniques, I'm going to find them. So I think we need to get back to hypothesis-driven research, and really a hypothesis is a statement that you either prove or disprove. So you can have that weird idea and make a hypothesis of it, and then it's testable. So like give people a chance to do things which are a little bit not so mainstream.
A lot of people these days, again, at least here, I can never talk about Sweden, but there's a lot of confusion with the newer researchers or new scholars with the hypothesis and the research question. And how do you come to
It's something
understand?
I feel very when I'm teaching research to both supervisors and to PhD students. I really stress the importance of actually understanding what a scientific hypothesis is, and it's quite interesting that many people who are not young, the established group leaders, can't actually. I have asked them to give me a definition. What's the definition of scientific hypothesis? And 50% of people actually can't do it. They talk about the research aim, a research question.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
it's not. The hypothesis is a statement, and the example I usually give is this: if the sun will shine tomorrow, that's my hypothesis. What will you do to test that hypothesis? I'll look out the window. What happened? It was raining. Disproved the hypothesis. What's the new hypothesis? The sun will shine the next day instead. And it's really that I will. My hypothesis and my research is that I will develop a therapy which will slow down or cure neurodegenerative diseases. That's what I do through applying DNA origami or amniotic epithelial cells or vaccinating with modified proteins. Those are my hypotheses, and I test them, and they either work or they don't work. I prove them or disprove them. The aim is something else. The aim is more towards knowledge, which supports the hypothesis, but the hypothesis has to be a statement. This will happen, and you either prove it will happen or you disprove it, and then you have to come up with a new one. So I think this should be fundamental. And the weirdest thing is that when we publish scientific journal articles, we never ever state the scientific hypothesis that we're testing. I
Yeah.
mean, what we start with science, you should start with the scientific hypothesis, and then you explain the study that you've done to prove it or not to prove it. But we never ever. It should be fundamental. That should be the first thing that's in a scientific publication. The scientific hypothesis was,
And why
in
is
my
that now? Why is it now that we're not stating the hypothesis when we're publishing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we ever have. But it's a fundamental flaw. If we're doing science, then that's what it should be based on, I think.
Hmm.
And of course, if you've managed to publish something, then you've usually proved your hypothesis, or some of the time. Uh, and if not, then when you don't actually get the expected findings, we did a study a few years ago, and we thought that if we depleted microglia in an Alzheimer's mouse model, which overexpresses tau protein, then we'd have an effect. But we didn't actually get too much of an effect, but we could still publish the results. But it's really sort of negative findings, and that would be good. You just say you disprove the hypothesis, like not 100%, but I think it would be. I think it should be standard.
Yeah,
Maybe I should start a journal and start doing that.
that would be really great, actually. Bob, you mentioned the word knowledge. What's the
Yeah.
difference between knowledge and understanding?
That's a really good one. I think that knowledge is knowing, and understanding is knowing why. That would be my answer. The knowledge is just being able to explain something, but the understanding is to be able to explain everything underlying that and what the impact is and so on. So it's more an implementation maybe of the knowledge one could think of as well. That's understanding.
Ah,
If
you've
you
made
if
sense.
it, so I can learn something. I can I can state a theory by Alfred Adler, my favorite philosopher, and one of his statements was, you should judge yourself. Don't let anyone else judge you. So that's the knowledge. I can repeat his his words, but understanding that and understanding what that means to me in my professional life is a completely different thing because just reciting the words is reciting the knowledge, but knowing what the knowledge means and how it can be used, that's the understanding.
This is so funny because when I first met you, Bob, I had the thought of Adler in my mind. I was like, there's some connection, but I could not figure it out. And I wrote it in my notes, and then so this is so
We're
lovely.
telepathically linked.
Yeah. Okay, so then if you have an idea, obviously that's neither knowledge or understanding, right? So when we look at the,
The idea will be based on prior knowledge, maybe.
yeah.
It has to come from some, and maybe even on prior understanding as well. But you come up with a new idea, then it's the new idea will be to provide new knowledge that will then give you new potential for new understanding.
How do you convince somebody to actually go with your idea?
Well, it's proven to be quite difficult. I think it's you need to inspire people to think the same way as you do. That's always quite difficult because we're all individual and we always different in things. I think especially for young researchers, they're very aware that you need to succeed. You know, if you haven't got good publications, then your chances of making an academic career at least are not so good these days. So it's publish or perish, you know, and so they prefer to go for something which is not new because then they have more chance of succeeding. But I do believe that you know the ones that dare to do something different are the ones that have the potential to reap the biggest rewards. So doing something like I love it when people prove paradigms to be wrong. You know, they have to not to be wrong. They just need to we maybe need to modernize our thinking. But if you actually things that people have believed for a long time, take the field of spinal cord injury. If you injure a spinal cord, you get a lot of the myeloid cells, which I'm interested in, macrophages, that will come to the site. So if you looked histologically at the spinal cord damage, you saw a damaged spinal cord, you saw lots of macrophages surrounding the damaged area, and the conclusion was that these are bad macrophages which are destroying the tissue. Completely wrong. They were actually coming there as a healing response to actually try and reduce the spread of the damage. So they were actually good guys, not bad guys. And it took 25 years for someone to be able to prove that molecularly. So I think that, I love it when people test knowledge because people tend to be in the research world tend to be extremely arrogant about the knowledge that they have and the understanding as well then in that context. And so this is the way it is, and it's the only way it can be. So
Yeah,
when someone comes along and then shows, well, that's not actually the case. It could be this as well. I think that's cool. We all learn something.
yeah. And it's always the younger ones I feel like that are like, hey, you've been around for a while and this is wrong.
I think new generation, of course, when you become older, you've had a career and you've shown these things. But the thing about science is we're actually standing on the shoulders of the people that have gone before us. So I mean, you just increase. It's the way I see it as well. So it's not that the prior knowledge is wrong, but why should we accept it? And many people have made very good careers by going back and looking at concepts which were controversial, 10, 20, 30 years ago, and just taking those and just rejuvenating them, modernizing those techniques and making very good publications for really for findings which are old, but they just sort of modernized them, juiced them up technically. Some of the techniques also are proven that the more refined techniques become the better. If you do scanning electron microscopy, you used to coat samples with gold in order for the camera to work and get images. I did some of this when I was at the university, and you get these really nice pictures, and everything had a smooth surface. And then when they gold was very expensive, and then they actually replaced it with platinum at sort of the end of the beginning of the 80s. And all of a sudden, platinum actually made a much thinner layer. So now you actually saw contours of something, which before you coated it with so much gold that you filled in all the cracks, in essence. So all the scanning electron microscopy, which is prior to late 1970s, is wrong.
Oh,
But it wasn't wrong at the time, and it was still like at the forefront. And this is the thing about technical advancements. The knowledge and understanding you have is only as good as the techniques that they are at the time. So maybe this is actually part of research is called research because the re is going back. And maybe this is the natural cycle that you need to go back and question then old theories and say, well, if we apply new technologies, maybe we get a different answer.
how does that work with AI these days? We
With
have
the
with AI these days.
But yeah, I mean, AI is incredible, giving us incredible potential. Uh, I'm not sure, the AIs that are dealing with research, like Perplexity, are getting very good actually at being knowledgeable about things. Um, and I'm not sure we'll get to a stage where they'll really be suggesting sort of research to be done. Um, but being able to, if we're talking about knowledge, then AI is a great collector of knowledge. So if we can master the way to actually extract that knowledge in order to try and start, I don't think there'll be understanding there, but we'll be able to maybe use it in that way to crunch the knowledge so that we might be able to actually have some new ideas about how to understand things. I mean, we can't hold back the tide of AI, but we need to work out how to use it in a good way. But considering that it's a uh, learned it's machine learning, then the more data we put in, then the better it maybe will become. And of course, there's no lower capacity. There's no finite capacity for the knowledge that you can store in digital systems. There is in a person, especially when you get older and you have a memory like mine, then you're losing a lot of the knowledge that you had. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that changes things actually.
You remember there was a few months ago, I think, there was a study that was published how I don't remember the exact percentage, so whoever's listening, don't quote me on this, but like it was a pretty high percentage, like more than 50% of papers were actually AI written.
Yeah. I think we need to. It's very easy to say those things. And I read things about that as well. There was a whole paper which had been AI fabricated, including all the results and things. So the technology is there, but I think we need to. What does AI written mean? Does it mean that you've written something and then you've asked AI to make it better? That's not AI written, it's AI modified. So we need to distinguish between AI written and AI modified. You can ask AI to write things for you straight from off the bat as well. Um, but now it's becoming easier to detect that. Actually, I got sent a paper from Leonard Nacke, one of the fantastic people I met on LinkedIn, and there's actually a study done showing how the use of models like ChatGPT have actually changed the way that people speak, and the language that they use when they're talking has become like a ChatGPT style,
Yeah.
and can actually, which is a bit scary. So yeah, but I think we need to obviously. I'm an Englishman in Sweden. I've been correcting people's thesis and public, manuscripts for 30 years because I'm a native English speaker and I'm actually quite good at writing. So people used to give me, pay me for that service. Now you don't need that. You can have ChatGPT or other Claude or other Perplexity, other large language models helping you do that. Is there any difference, really? That someone's assisting you in getting the flow, getting the grammar correctly. Does it matter if it's a human or if it's a machine doing it? It's the same essence. You're just bettering the flow of your writing. So I think, and also we know that if you haven't got English as your mother tongue, then it's more difficult. So it's a plus if you're a native speaker and a minus if you're not. So this is a leveler where everyone can then produce good text. So I think we need to be careful about. Well, obviously, if you the big question for doctor education, which I'm responsible for here at Karolinska Institute, that is will you be able to write a whole thesis like using AI? And I don't think you ever will because you have to have those human thoughts that pose those questions. And at the moment, I don't think AI will be able to do it. Maybe it will become so knowledgeable in the future that it will be able to do it. But that sort of takes the fun out of it. So, so while we have systems, we have AIs that can detect AI type of things. That can they distinguish between this has been modified by AI or this has been written by AI? I'm not sure.
It's interesting you mentioned the study where people are starting to speak like ChatGPT. I've had so many conversations where I question if I'm speaking to a human being or not.
Yeah, it's actually happened to me when people have contacted me through LinkedIn and wanting to do things, and then when they get in touch and suddenly they say, "Oh, my camera's not working," and then I'm like, "Okay, I'm talking to a bot there."
Yeah.
Yes, interesting. But
How do you,
we need to sort of navigate through that and learn to see the signs. Because if we become distant with that and we start to be fooled and we start talking to machines, then where are we? That's my worry.
how do you distinguish though? And what do you do in that situation?
I think you need to be. I mean, I got fooled at the start, but then I got suspicious, and then I started to repeat things and to see how it was dealt with, and I didn't think that I was getting any reasonable answers actually. So then I cut that conversation, but I actually saw a LinkedIn post today saying that some guy had been shut down from LinkedIn because LinkedIn had thought that he wasn't a real person, which he was. So there's we need to find the balance with, correct usage and incorrect usage, and how we don't punish people for doing things when they're not doing things. So it's a new world, but we need to learn by doing, and it's fun. I was talking to a bot for 20 minutes, and that was 20 minutes a waste of my life, but it was a good experience.
Yeah.
Taught me
Oh,
something new.
yeah. Yeah, I'm really fascinated to see how the field goes in that arena. Because
I think when the AI has been sort of, come up as being the worst thing that could ever happen. I can remember when the internet first came up in the 80s and people think this is going to be, everyone's going to be stuck with a computer. And it didn't happen for 40 years. I mean, we're there now. So there's always like that, worry about technology that's going to change things. But sort of the internet, when my son was younger, a young boy, 5, 6 years old, he wanted to play a lot of computer games, and I was very much against that, thinking you should be out playing with, physically with your friends. Until I realized he was actually communicating with people all over the world. He was having a network which I had no chance of having when I was his age. So we need to see the pros and the cons of all these type of technological and how it changes societal values. But it's an ever-changing world, so we'll see where we go. And I think people will probably get bored, just like you get bored with any sort of app game that you get on your iPhone and you play it for a few months and then you get bored and you go on to something else. Then maybe this is what will happen with this AI revolution, that it will become so normal that it's not we don't have to think about it too much.
yeah, I can see that.
Mm.
I heard recently, I think it was Elon Musk actually, and he said that he encouraged people to no longer get medical degrees because AI will do it for you. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah, there was a sort of I mean, if you want people to talk about you, then that's a great way to get people to talk about you by saying things. I think that AI can be very useful in certain aspects of healthcare and certainly in some forms of diagnosis as well. But we're still going to need medics, you know. So I think those type of statements, these are sort of the things that get people going and get people worried, and people believe them, And a bit
Yeah.
like saying vaccination leads to autism. That was one of the biggest scandals in the scientific field, and not proven to be the case. But if people believe believe people, especially when they have very big followings, then it's quite dangerous.
Mm. Thanks for not being that person, Bob. Because every time I see everything you share, it's just so inspiring. I send it to others, and they're like, "Who's this guy? I need to
Yeah,
know."
I mean, I think that one of the things which has happened when it comes to LinkedIn and other things, and I was involved in a discussion earlier today about the interview. What the PhD student going for interview? What should you think about? And now you can prep yourself so well using ChatGPT and things, and get these wonderful answers. But what's happened is that we've gone away from this, and there's this idea of authenticity, which has become very important both with, and I think I Fabricon that does some analysis of LinkedIn and other social media sort of impact have this authenticity score which they've introduced, which has completely changed the rankings, and people who used to be top LinkedIn creators have suddenly disappeared, and I've become one of the in Sweden. I'm one of the top ones, um, and I think it's because I am authentic. And I think, when you go to interview, you need to be authentic.
Yeah.
You're not wanting to give these politically correct chat GPT, this is how it is, because everyone's going to be saying the same thing. But it's like, oh, I think this, or I didn't know this, or I was interested. You need to see the person. And I think that can come through in the text. And that's certainly a comment I get from people who reach out to me and say, I really enjoy reading your text. They're so believable. And of course, that's what I do. I just put down my thoughts, for the day. And if it helps people think a good way, then I'm happy for that. So thank you.
Wow, that's so good. So you mentioned student and you mentioned authenticity, and I'm sure you have had a lot of experience where students feel they have to wear a certain mask.
We all in different ways. I usually say that my work person is this. My real person. If I'm really want to feel like myself, I'm very different. So I put my mask on every day when I come to work, because I have a role and there are expectations that one will do these things. It's still me, and but my perception of who I am when I'm a private person, when I'm by myself, is completely different. Of course, when you're by yourself, you are different, because most of the time I'm standing up in front of people and having meetings or lecturing or conferences and things. So of course it's different. Of course you're going to be different. But I think I think it's a bit like putting on a uniform. I didn't used to look this smart before until I became dean. But then it's like it goes with the territory. You should be respectable, and there's an expectation that you should look professional. So if you wear a blazer and a shirt as opposed to, and a sleeveless t-shirt, then you look a little bit more more professional. And it's much the same as you do that. I think you can put on your mask as well, and there's nothing wrong with that, because it's expected in the roles, and that's part of your role. It's not that you're acting; it's just that you're becoming that persona that you're supposed to be in that context. And maybe that's as we all are as humans, that we're in different contexts with different things. When we're talking to friends or loved ones or strangers, then we react in different ways. And whether that's we're putting on different masks, or whether we're just showing a different side of ourselves, maybe that's an interesting philosophical question.
I wish one day we can see the weird Bob. Weird in quotes, you know what I mean by that.
People say you're seeing it now. Yeah. That was one of the fun things when I used this Mad Bob as my hashtag, because people look at the word mad and think mad crazy, and of course mad for me is making a difference, MAD. But I'm sure this is the thing. You can't. This is going back to Adler. You can't people are going to make their own opinions, and they're welcome to that. And if they're different from your own perception of yourself, that's fine. So I'm sure some people look at this Bob and say, yeah, he's a weird one, and other people will have a different opinion. That's fine.
Yeah, I personally think you're one of the most inspiring individuals I've met online because we have not met in person yet, and I look forward to when we do.
Yeah,
Uh,
that would be great.
Bob, so with the fact that anyway,
So
naturally,
just wanted to pick up on that, because the word inspiring makes me so happy. Yeah, I think as a teacher, as a scientist, as a person, then that's the one thing that we should all strive for. Can you inspire someone else? Can you ignite the flame in someone else by encouraging them, uh, maybe to make a career decision or to turn their life around if they're feeling down or something? Inspire. It's not a word that I hear so many people use, and I think we should use it a lot more. That should be a fundamental. Can you inspire someone else to have a better day, to do something, to make a better choice, whatever? But we should use that word a lot more often. Sorry, I just
I think this might be the title of this episode at the end. Thank you for that. So my question was, Bob, like, if we know everyone's wearing a mask anyway, sometimes there are individuals who are not very good at like what is the boundary of the mask, right? And then they blur the boundary. So I'm curious if for students and supervisors and professors, so this is a loaded question, if you can have some advice on what's the role, what are the boundaries, and how do you not go past that?
yeah. The boundaries in the professional relationship, you meaning? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very it's very important to always be professional when you're at work. And this is something which changes with age. When I was 20 years ago, when I was or 30 years ago now. I'm going to turn 60 this year, so I'm starting to feel my age in numbers, not in my body, but in the number. But if I was go back to my 30-year-old Bob, and as a supervisor then the difference in age between me and my students was less than 10 years. And I behaved in a different way. I was a lot more of a friend to them, and it actually caused an issue with the very first PhD student I had because she was the same age as me, and it was very difficult for her to consider me as her boss. And quite frankly, I didn't really like feel like a boss because of that. The older you get, the easier that is because you have this separation, and then it's a little bit easier to understand the boundaries. But when you're younger and you're more pally and we spend time at conferences, drinking beer, going for dinners and things, then you become a little bit more of a friend. And it's very, very easy then that people can go past what is a good boundary because I'll always be a boss or a supervisor, even if I'm out eating dinner with somebody. So I should always think about my responsibility as a role model. Now, as the Dean of Doctorate Education at KI, I have to think about it even more. So do you need to, is it worth making that joke? Or is it worth taking up a political theme, which might be, you learn to sort of steer away these things. And I think that's part of professional training, that you need to understand your role model at that time and at that age. Um, I think it's very nice to be friendly with your staff. I get to know my staff a lot. I think it's very important to be able to know them well enough to be able to look at them and have an idea whether they're having a good day or not so good day, so that you know whether this is a person I should spend more time with or not. And you don't do that if you don't get to know them as a person. But where does the boundary go? I tend to be somebody that gets people to talk to them. The people tend to open up and tell me their whole life stories and intimate details of whatever. And there's always been the case for me ever since I was a kid. Even a teenager at school, people used to come and tell me all their problems and things. And maybe I'm just like I have the face of a good listener, or my mask is a good listener. But I think that so I think one should always be have a check in your head, in your mindset, to thinking, always be professional. Where should the boundary be? And try and relate to that. If you don't think about it at all, if you never reflect where could a boundary be in this situation, then you might go past them without knowing. So I think I think this is something one should think about a little bit more than
And
we
when
do.
you go past the boundary, because we're
Um,
human, right? You go past the boundary, then what happens? How do you remedy that? Or if somebody else goes past the boundary?
Depends what you've done, and it depends whether you've understood it yourself. In which case, it's very easy to apologize and try and undo whatever it is that you've done. But otherwise, you'll get that feedback hopefully from someone else saying, that was not okay, and that's what I hope happens. well, it should happen most of the time, that we actually regulate each other by giving positive and negative feedback about people's behavior. I don't think we do that enough because we're scared of hurting people. And then we tend not to do the positive feedback either because we don't want to build people up too much either, which is crazy. You need to know when you're doing something well. You need to know when you're not doing something well. That's how we learn. If we would, if we would have a society where we gave positive and negative feedback to each other all the time, then it wouldn't be such a big deal. And then if someone gives you feedback, I think we talked about it last time. It's like it's a gift. I'm giving you the possibility to change your behavior, to think about your behavior and to change it for the better if
Yeah.
you make the right decision, according to me, you know. So we need to do that. So if you've understood, you've crossed the boundary, and you will find out if you've done something wrong, you'll be accused of something, or someone will show that their displeasure. Then you need to deal with it. And I don't think we actually hear the words "I'm sorry" too
Mm.
much. I learned that from Randy Pausch. I don't know if you know his last lecture. There was a scientist, computer scientist, who died of pancreatic cancer. He was made famous on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and I think it was at Cornell University. They have this last lecture series. But the last, like, if you had to give the last lecture in your life, what would it be? And he was dying of pancreatic cancer. The last lecture was all about living. It was really a message to his kids at the time. But one of the things included in his speech was he talked about this. When you do something wrong, you have to own it, and you have to say, "I am sorry. How can I make it better?" Those are his words, and that stuck with me a lot. And I think that I hear too few people actually, firstly, admitting they've done something wrong, crossing a boundary, and two, then apologizing for it. There come lots of excuses for why it happened. That's not important. First, you should apologize. Have I done you wrong? I apologize. It's something I try and do in my professional work day because I make mistakes just like everyone else.
Yeah. Thanks for owning up to that too, Bob.
No.
So we are in a society of excuses, unfortunately. I mean, we can justify anything. I think human beings are the master manipulators of all.
Yeah,
Yeah. How do you get out of that habit? Or how do you teach others to get out of that habit?
I think the words that we use, manipulation is it's a perfect word, but it sounds so sort of wrong. If you master manipulator, we all manipulate each other through our actions, consciously or unconsciously. You do it. So I think it's quite normal, but the question is whether you're manipulating people for the right reasons or not. You can, and when I'm trying to resolve conflicts, which come up to me to solve here at the university, uh, I've learned how to have these conversations in a way that I can lead people to coming to the place where I think they need to do in order to be able to resolve the conflict. That's manipulation. I've used a different word there, saying I'm going to lead them in that way, but I'm doing that through posing questions or giving them comments, and that's manipulation. So I think manipulation doesn't inherently need to be bad unless the reason you're doing it to swindle people out of money or something to get them to do something they actually don't want to do that can be harmful for them. That's another form of manipulation, which is not good. So but just like we discussed earlier, we all have masks on, and it's not to hide. It's really just to be able to feel comfortable in the role that I have to be in this context. Then maybe we manipulate people according to what is needed in this context as well. So we're constantly manipulating each other by our expressions, especially by our body language, especially by our sort of our pondus. If we have that, people who have a lot of pondus are a lot more easy to sort of manipulate other people. So I think it's sort of a natural part of society, and we don't think of it like that. So there's nothing wrong with it unless you're doing it for the wrong reasons, well, personal gain and so on.
When you say that, I think maybe the word influence is actually better.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, really, I mean, even if you're using words to somebody, you're just putting ideas into their head. it's still up to them whether they're going to act on it or not. If I can convince you to give me all your savings, for some reason, then it's still you that has to do it. So
Yeah.
yes, I think it's more an influence, decision making.
I wish we were in person so I can hand you an empty envelope. Bob, we have, as you know, we have a ritual here where the previous podcast guest asks a question to the next one. You have two questions, if that's all right. So your first question is what is the most important piece of advice that you can give to current and wannabe researchers that is seldom known?
But it's seldom known.
Yeah, that people don't want to talk about.
I think the most pertinent comment will be most of you will not stay in academia at every level of education, because academia is not built to accommodate everybody. And I have seen so many students come in and say, as young PhD students, I'm going to be a professor by the time I'm 30 or whatever. But the reality is that less than 1% will become that. So I think that in the academic world, then that's probably the best advice, so that you don't become disappointed. It's not to say that, okay, this is going to be so competitive, it's not worth going there. That's not at all. It's still the coolest thing to do. I'm very happy I'm a professor at the university. But I think that it's nice to know that then I'm doing this for another reason, right from the bat. I'm going to have a brilliant career doing something else, and there are lots of different careers out there. So it doesn't make it any less worthwhile being at the university and doing education at any of the three levels. But I think that that's probably something we don't talk enough about, so that people are a little bit fooled by the aura of, especially the sort of the most famous universities, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and things, with this idea of all this history and everything, and that's only going to be the reality for very few people. So that's probably what I'd say. I
Mhm.
wasn't very
That was
but
great. I remember when I was a kid and I was 7 or 8 years old and I had two wishes. One was to be a scholarly monk, so I'm kind of there as a nun. And the second one at the time was I said, I'm going to be the dean of Oxford University Psychology Department. And
when I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a farmer. So that didn't happen.
yeah. So your other question, Bob, is there a topic that we didn't cover today that you think people need to know about?
I think we covered many things. What more could one talk about? I think that what I'd really like to talk about sometime is really the human mindset. This idea that in my mind, whether it be in an academic setting or just in outside life, but this idea that people see the glass is half full or half empty, and I think we have this. Maybe it's natural. We tend to dwell in the negativity. So the glass is more half empty than it is half full. And I think this comes to sort of the general concept of well-being. That we focus on not well-being as opposed to well-being. And how can we change that mindset so that people not fooling themselves by always going for the positive, but I think that generally the human race is very negative at the moment, and we just look around and we think everyone's doing better than me. And I hear so many people say to me, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not enough. We talk about in PhD education. There are so many posts on LinkedIn about imposter syndrome and things. Flip it. You're at a university, you're learning things, you're having a chance to learn things, and many people don't have a chance. 15% of the population will do a postgraduate education or a university education, and of those, only a fraction will do postgraduate education. We have these fantastic privileges. Why aren't we happier about these things? And instead of like flipping it, oh, well, I'm not driving a Lamborghini, or I'm not earning this much money or whatever. I think that I think that humans, we're living in a society which is so complex. There's so much stuff. There's so much technology. If I think my parents who grew up during the Second World War in England, then they didn't have, the stuff that we have now. I think they were happier, you know.
Yeah.
So why is society getting, when we have so many more opportunities, we're able to fly to the other side of the world in one day, as opposed to 3 months on a boat, going down to Australia from Europe or something. Why can't we sort of stop and think, hey, it's pretty cool what we have today? I think that is from a psychological point of view, why is our psyche sort of default to be negative? That would be something I think could be of interest to discuss another time.
Yeah, I put that in my notes. Maybe a third interview if you don't mind next time. Yeah, thank you so much, Bob, for taking your time with us.
My
And
pleasure.
and for those who maybe haven't heard the previous podcast, can you just remind people how they can find you and your work?
Yeah, Robert.Harris at at ki.se. You find me on the Karolinska Institute homepage if you put my name in, or you find me on LinkedIn as well. There's only one Mad Bob, hashtag Mad Bob. So
Great.
those are three different ways to find me.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Harris is such a common name in England, but in Sweden it's not so common, so it's a little bit easier to find.
Thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate it.